Welcome to Marc My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Marc My Words. This episode is sponsored by GrowX Labs. Quick question. When you're leading a team or growing a business, who helps you think clearly? GrowX Labs offers executive decision support, real-time access to a trusted strategist who helps you navigate tough calls, leadership blind spots, and everything in between. No fluff, no long-term commitment, just fast, honest insight from someone who gets it. If you're a founder or exec and need a sounding board, go to growxlabs.com/mark. That's grwxlabs.com/mark and book a discovery call today. I'm afraid, or maybe even not afraid, that I have another episode where this is really getting me excited and reminding me of why I do Marc My Words to begin with. I strive to do episodes that bring something different to the table every time, but when I get a guest that's just so unique and so niched in what they're doing, and I know it's going to be like a colorful topic and a colorful episode, just kind of going into some territory that I personally have never ventured into with Marc My Words. That really gets me excited to do this show. And today I have Steve Frazier, who has been an entrepreneur for years, and he's currently specializing in helping people with their coffee fix. And I, for one, so I am not a coffee drinker only because my tummy can't handle it, but I'm very addicted to caffeine. I make a Dunkin' run every morning. I love the mango refresher, and I definitely feel a difference between having the refresher and not having caffeine and not having caffeine. And I am really intrigued by Steve Frazier's mission, and let me just kind of read a few things to introduce him. So he is a self-proclaimed caffeine mythbuster on a mission. No jitters, just truth, spilling the beans on buzz, crashes, and how to thrive with or without the cup. Wake up informed, not wired. He's the man who broke up with coffee and lived to tell the tale. I could take a billion pieces of text from Steve Frazier's social media and Podmatch profile, but I am pretty much going to leave it at that and just say he is the founder and coach at Release the Coffee Cups. Steve Frazier, welcome to Marc My Words. How you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Mark. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's a real pleasure to have you here and a real treat. So when I do this show, I work really, really hard to make sure that every episode has something about it that stands out from all the others. And I have no doubt that this is definitely new territory for me, because I, for one, just probably like most people, pretty much just figure that everybody's in agreement that they need their caffeine fix, they need coffee, and why in the world would anybody have a business focused around helping people to break off something that is, for most people, a very pleasurable part of their life. Like, that's the thing that really gets a lot of people's days going. Even though I don't drink actual coffee, I do know that my Dunkin' Refresher is very addictive, and it's also very delicious. And I know that I could live without it, but there's like a part of you that just feels like you can't live without it. And it's just one of those things. So I can't wait to dive into this conversation with you.
Well, I'm going to comment on what you just said. Ironically, as I talk to people about what I do, I have had people look at me and look me right in the eye and say, "You will never take my coffee from me," which I have no intention of. Okay. And I had a lady, I was doing a presentation, and I need a visual, so I'm going to put my hands up like this. She looked at me. She's sitting right in front of me, and she's got her hands together like this. And she looks at me and she said, "You can never take my coffee away from me." And I looked at her and I said, "I have no intention of doing that. You control that 100%. But you being here lets you know what coffee does to your mind and body. That's all I'm here for. I'm an I want to influence possibly, but I can't make anybody do what they want, because everybody has free will and free won't."
Well, I'll tell you what, me being me, I am not necessarily looking for you to 100% convince me or, make me stop drinking my refresher, but I am definitely open to anything and everything, and will probably walk away with a lot of, I guess, impressions from
Right.
this, I'm sure. So
Agreed.
I'm all ears, but
Okay.
before we really get into that, first of all, you're from probably one of my favorite states in the U.S. You're from Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's a beautiful state, and it looks like you, way back in the day, did some business administration at the University of Wisconsin Whitewater, and obviously human resources and personnel administration
Mhm.
mixed into that. Did you know what you wanted to do growing up? Did you know that you wanted to do like anything with HR? Was there anything else you dreamed of?
Well, that's a great question, because when I went to college, I didn't go to college till I was 21. I took 3 years off of high school. I lived with my mom and dad. I had a great time, to say the least. And I realized after 3 years I was going nowhere. I then decided that I needed an education to get me somewhere. And so I graduated from Whitewater. I live up in north central Wisconsin in the Wausau area. And so when I got out of college, the only place that I could get a job was McDonald's Corporation in Madison. And I had about 7 or 8 years of restaurant experience. I had run an A&W. I grew up in an A&W, mug boy, cook, assistant manager, whatever. So McDonald's hired me. I proceeded to get fired after 5 months. And of all the jobs I've had, I learned more in that 5 months from McDonald's Corporation than I have in any other job. They're very, very good at what they do. Okay. And I got fired because I didn't want to be there. And the supervisor, area supervisor that terminated me, was pretty honest. He said, "We know you don't want to be here, and we're just putting you out of your misery." And I then went into another factory job back up in Wausau and realized that this was not my life. I wanted to be free. And so I hooked up with a guy that I had worked back in the A&W business, and I ran a KFC for him. with the understanding that he would sell it to me. So as we talk about entrepreneur things, I'll put in my 2 cents worth. Okay. Don't ever have an offer to purchase or a purchase agreement verbal, because it just doesn't work. Because I ran the store for a year, and just like that, he raised the price $100,000. And that wasn't going to work. And I was in the right place at the right time. I was 28 years old. I bought my first restaurant with no money down. My mom and dad borrowed us $7,000 for inventory. It was a unique situation. You have to be in the right place at the right time, but you also have to be ready. And when I went in, the guy that owned it was an absentee owner. It was a restaurant. It was a small Mexican bar and restaurant in a regional mall. And the owner was absentee. He was a heavy equipment salesman. And they were stealing probably $10,000 a month from him. He made it a year. The bank knew he was gone. The mall landlords knew he was gone. And my accountant, who was my friend, lined me up with the guys, and everything fell together. 2 months later, I owned the restaurant. And when we closed, the day that we closed on that, he was so out of the whole picture, he didn't even know we were closing. We closed at his bank on the phone in a conference call with my attorney, the banker, and his attorney. And so anyway, I bought that. And then 3 years later, I built another restaurant. And then 2 years after that, I got remarried, and Brenda and I built another restaurant. And then a year later, we built another restaurant. And the first one I built, I got to sold. I got out, no harm, no foul. I got out with all the liabilities they paid. So I actually kind of a wash, but a lot of experience. Then went on to build 2 or 3 more over the next 15 years. So the 23-year span, I owned and operated 6 different restaurants, and I loved it. And no matter how much I worked, when we opened a restaurant, both Brenda and I would work between 100 and 110 hours a week.
Wow.
And when I say that to people, they kind of frown and say that's impossible. Well, no, it's not. Because when you work from the minute you get up to the minute you go to bed, 7 days a week, that's what you come up with. Okay. And if you really want to make it, you have to work at it. And we loved what we did. We were passionate. Passionate is not the only thing for success, but it's necessary for success. Just as in your business, you're a podcaster. Okay. If you didn't have passion, you wouldn't be here today, because you've had some great episodes and you've had some stinkers. And hopefully I'm in the great category. However, so ultimately, my last two, I had one restaurant for 20 years, and that was that first one. And it was the Golden Goose. I made money for 18 years, and it allowed me to live a very nice lifestyle. I got to spend time with my wife and my kids. And when that all ended, then I had to start over. My next venture was as a real estate agent. So, and I did quite well for a couple of years. I was at the end of I was right in the housing recession, and I got involved with some banks in foreclosures. I found 2 investors. And so I made some good money, had a lot of fun, made some good friends. I realized after about 2 years after that this wasn't for me. I got burnt by clients and just burnout. And so then I started a speaking business. I worked for Fred Pryor, which is a company that I trained Excel on the road all around the country. And I misunderstood what they wanted when I was hired, because I thought they wanted trainers and they actually wanted salesmen. And I'm not blowing my own horn here. I was an exceptional trainer, and I was terrible at selling their products. And so 2 years of that, and I missed being home. My granddaughters are with my wife at home because they stayed with us a lot. I miss them. I talk to them every night. And then my wife got sick, and that started everything that I'm doing now. Started 13 years ago when she got chronically ill with Lyme disease. and she was undiagnosed for 2 years. And then our daughter, who at the time had just got certified as a natural health practitioner, diagnosed her with Lyme disease. And then another practitioner confirmed that 4 days later. So she has been in a battle because 2 years undiagnosed in Lyme, there was a lot of damage to her organs. She was almost dead when our daughter Alex started working with her. And what we did is we went down the natural health rabbit hole. And once you go down, you never come back. And so, we learned a lot of things. She not only was celiac, but she's also grain intolerant. Okay, now you start adding these things up. She can't eat any processed food. Okay, so I cook all the meals from scratch. We don't eat anything that has 5 ingredients or more is off the table. What she did is she created a pasta. And she called it Dr. Noodles by Brenda because at the time she was about to get her doctorate. And we had some friends over and we told them about the noodle business. And they said, well, we could call you Dr. Noodles. So names come from really bizarre places. And it's made with garbanzo beans, arrowroot starch, xanthan gum, and organic eggs. 4 ingredients. I had it non-GMO certified by a big company. And I did fairly well. There's a caveat, though. I had 36 accounts at one time, all across Minnesota, Wisconsin. I had a couple in Illinois. After 4 years, I decided that it was a hobby, because the true definition of a hobby is something that you do that you don't make any money at. So after 4 years of traveling almost every weekend to Minneapolis or Madison or Milwaukee, I figured I lost about $125,000.
Oh, gosh.
And so, again, hard lesson. Brenda was making a good living as a college professor. So, we made it through it. And then we got out of that, and I started another business called Organites by Steve, which I still do part-time. I have a website, Organites by Steve, and it's a different kind of business. We had a great potential target market. My daughter was involved with a gentleman who created a whole program on muscle testing called morphogenic field technique, and she was actually a trainer with him, and we were invited to his seminars. So we worked with practitioners and chiropractors, and we sold them our products. And we went to Boston and Nashville, Chicago, to Minneapolis. We drove our car. We took all our organites along. We sold to these people. And I had a good retail business, but I had a great wholesale business. And then COVID hit. Okay, no more seminars. And it dried up because we didn't have that, because we're not in their face anymore.
Right.
It out of sight, out of mind. And so I still have that business. And I sell some, but not very many. Once again, now it's simply a hobby. But
no. So let me cut into your story a little bit. I'll let you pick it up in a minute. But you said a lot of really good stuff there. One of my favorite things that you said was you gotta have passion to do what you're doing. And you saw me shake my head very emphatically that I definitely would not be doing this if I didn't have the passion. And that's actually one of the most valuable lessons I've learned in entrepreneurship, because there were many times, and you talked about how there were great episodes and there were stinkers. And let me just start by saying, any episode that I consider a true stinker, I am the only one who will actually ever hear it. Any episode that I feel was not good enough to be put out, those episodes, and there aren't many, there's like a handful, but those stinkers are never going to be heard. At least I don't think they will. But you made a great point with that, and I feel like that's a conversation I've had a few times recently, is that in order to do this, so especially like there's so many people who go into podcasting, they have their ideas of what it's going to be like, but it takes a lot of work. You have to stay on top of publishing episodes, and there's a lot more work that goes into it than hitting record, having a conversation, and hitting stop. And a lot of those people, when they realize that, they stop doing it. But
Yep.
then there's people like me that when I've gone through the stinker episodes and some of the other obstacles I've had, and then decided crazily to keep going, that is what taught me, holy cow, I have like an actual passion for
Yes.
what I'm doing. And I think that's when you know, when you have disappointments and when things come up that are big obstacles and you still dust yourself off and keep going and learning and keep growing, that's a passion right there.
Yes.
So, and I think you have something you wanted to say.
Well, you know, what we're going to talk in a couple of minutes about caffeine and the book and the website. The passion is there. And I'll tell you how I got there. One was you realize I started on this natural health journey with Brenda because we didn't have a choice. It was either that or she dies, right? So when you're thrown into this, you learn. You know, the first couple of years were rough. I made her sick a couple of times. Didn't know it, you know, until after. You don't know until it happens. But then several years ago, I got involved and I got certified as a self-sabotage coach. And it's interesting. The gentleman that teaches it, I'd been following for years on Facebook, and it fascinated me. And so when I spent almost a year and a half in his classes before I got certified, because I really wanted to know what it was all about. And there's 4 pillars in self-sabotage: emotional, financial, spiritual, and physical. And in the physical realm pillar, there's a number of things where we self-sabotage. Okay, alcohol, nicotine, overeating, caffeine, drugs, prescription drugs, not exercising. These are all self-sabotage techniques, because self-sabotage is about undermining your own values and morals. And as I looked at them and I realized, I thought to myself, where can I have the most influence? Well, I looked at caffeine, and I've been on and off caffeine for my entire life. And so I never judge. I don't shame, because, and I use it occasionally when necessary. And when I say that, we travel to Florida twice a year. We drive back and forth. And I'm not a spring chicken, so we don't go all night, okay? But I still drive 10 or 12 hours a day. And realistically, I don't want to fall asleep because I know we're dying. And so I drink caffeine. Now, I pay for this at night. We get to the hotel room, and there's nights when I have laid there for 2 or 3 hours, but because I'm wired, and I can get into the details of that a little bit later. And then the next morning I'm really tired. So what am I going to do? I'm going to drink caffeine again, right? I mean, and this is a cycle which is just brutal. So what happened then is that about 2 years ago, I had my first cognizant episode of quitting caffeine. I quit cold turkey, which I would never recommend anybody to do. And I had the caffeine headache, which I'll explain to you shortly why you get it. And I was brain fog, and I had fatigue. And I called up my daughter, who is a natural health practitioner. I said, what can you do? What can you help me with here? She kind of chuckled. She said, well, you can drink as much water as you can. It helps to flush the system. She said, you can take some ibuprofen just to humor yourself. Because realize she does natural supplements. She doesn't do any, even over-the-counter drugs, right? She said, the only other option I have for you, Dad, is drink more caffeine because that is the only thing that gets rid of that headache, and that wasn't an option. So I sucked it up, and for anybody that's listening, this can take anywhere from 12 hours to 7 to 9 days. You can have the headaches, you can have the withdrawal, you can have the fatigue. Now that's the immediate thing. So as I started to pursue the caffeine and look at the statistics, 85% of adults in the United States drink caffeine daily. That's 200 to 300 million people. Have I got a market, right? Now realize I'm like the salmon swimming upstream though, because caffeine is legal. It is incredibly socially accepted. Okay. In fact, if you don't drink caffeine, you're not part of the herd. That's a self-sabotage term, because if you want to be in the herd, you never make waves. And a couple of weeks ago, I had breakfast with a good friend of mine. Waitress comes up, says, "What can I get you guys to drink?" He says, "I'll have a coffee." And she looked at me and I said, "I'll have a decaf." He slammed his hands down on the table and he said, "Decaf?" I said, "Yeah, caffeine doesn't agree with me." And a little while later, I brought it up to him and I said, "You realize what you just did to me? 9 out of 10 people would have had regular coffee because you tried to shame me into having regular coffee. So if you decide to ever quit coffee or caffeine in whatever form, soda, energy drinks, be prepared for the social aspect of quitting. Because in my opinion, on all the research I've done, the physical aspect is one and done. Once you get through that physical withdrawal, you still need to work on it mentally. But the social aspect is all the people you used to have coffee with, you're now not part of the herd. You're a pariah.
Yeah, it's almost like when you're hanging out with people and you're drinking alcohol together, or you have like that shared experience, and then
Yes.
maybe it's everybody goes to the casino or everybody watches something together, and
Yep.
all of a sudden you have that friend group. You want to still be a part of it, but you don't want to do a certain thing. It changes everything.
It does. It does. And you need to be ready for that. Because it's real. Your true friends will accept you for who you are.
Yeah,
I don't need to go any farther.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I don't even know what to say to that, just,
Yep.
yeah. But one thing, so let me see how I can bridge the gap on this. So, sorry.
That's okay.
So, yeah, I'm just kind of going through because you're really kind of buttoning up all of the questions that I had without me even answering them, which is fantastic.
Okay.
But, so let's talk a little bit about what caffeine does to the nervous system and adrenal glands.
Okay.
I mean, you talked a bit about how it was keeping you up at night when you were on the road.
Sure.
And for me, I almost feel like it helps me, but I don't feel like it keeps me up. So, like, if I did the exact same thing as you, it'd be like, wow, that was a great pick-me-up. I needed that. But as soon as it would be time to go to sleep, I would most likely be able to sleep. What might be the difference between you and I?
Well, one thing that's important is that each one of us are unique. And so we all have different reactions to caffeine. And we all process it differently. It's called methylation. It goes through your body. Some people, as an example, women in certain times of their period, if they're on birth control pills, it can increase the half-life of caffeine double. Okay, it is what it is, right? These are scientific facts. And so what happens then is if they have a regular cup of coffee at noon, normally the half-life is 5 to 8 hours. Now the half-life is 10 to 16 hours. So if they have a 200 milligram cup of coffee at noon, they could still have 100 milligrams in their system at 2 o'clock in the morning, just as an example. Now, realizing that once you drink caffeine regularly, you're going to go to sleep at night. So when we're going to get into your question now, okay, of what's going on, because everybody that drinks caffeine sleeps, right? They're not up all night. So there's no way I'm telling you that doesn't happen. It does affect your sleep cycle incredibly. And I'll touch on that, and then I'll go back to what happens in the morning. So what happens in your sleep cycle is you go to sleep, but it's very hard for your body to reach stage 3 sleep, which is where you heal. And then stage 4 sleep, your REM sleep, is where you dream. And both of those are shortened and sometimes even eliminated, but that usually you'll get something out of it. So what happens is you don't get a really good night's sleep. You wake up in the morning. What's the first thing you want to do? I'm going to have a caffeine. I'm going to have a coffee, or I'm going to have a refresher. I'm going to have an energy drink, because you're tired, because you didn't get that deep sleep. Now, how does this all relate back to what happens in the first thing in the morning? So I'm going to tell you what I do. Okay, this is not perfect, but this is a good guideline. First thing I do when I wake up, I walk to my living room window, which faces east, and I look at it. I look at the sunrise, or I look at the sun, whatever time of the morning it is. What that does is it sets my natural cortisol level. In your circadian rhythm, your cortisol naturally is highest when you wake up. It's like an energy boost. And then as your day goes on, your cortisol goes down, and your melatonin and your adenosine goes up. Now, adenosine is something that's not a really common word. It's really important because you have adenosine receptors in your brain, and that's what puts you to sleep at night naturally, along with your melatonin. Now, here's the catch. Caffeine molecules are extremely similar to adenosine molecules. So when you drink caffeine, the caffeine molecules go into the receptors and block it. So your adenosine doesn't go into your brain. So mentally, you don't get tired. Physically, you can. Absolutely. But what happens? But then in about 1 to 3 hours, your adenosine receptors open up. What happens? Blood starts to flow to your brain. You get a little headache. You get a little brain fog. Because remember, your adenosine is going in there now. And what does adenosine do? It makes you tired.
So I guess one thing that, and I don't know if I'm cutting you off. If I am, you can continue your thought.
Oh.
But I would be curious to know how, what are some ways that I and the rest of the world can, change our relationship with caffeine?
Well, one of the best things, if you're not going to quit, is to don't drink it first thing in the morning. Give yourself at least an hour or two. Because what it does when you get up, and many people, it's the first thing they do when they get up is they drink coffee or whatever caffeine. What that does is it naturally increases your cortisol. And this is not the natural way. It's artificial cortisol stimulant. It also increases your adrenaline and puts you in fight or flight. Okay, which is not, unless you're running from a bear or a tiger, you don't want to be in fight or flight. There's times when it's really important. And there is a point where your body stops reacting, which is a bad thing. If you drink too much caffeine, your adrenals, because your adrenals are what's doing this, right? They're pumping that adrenaline out. And so the first thing to do, if you don't want to quit and you want to keep your relationship, is don't drink it right away, because then you naturally will wake up and your cortisol will spike naturally instead of with a stimulant. And then try not to have any caffeine after noon, at 12 noon, or maybe 1 or 2 o'clock at the latest. Again, we all process differently. So if you process it fast, then you could have one. You could have a cup maybe at 4 o'clock, and it wouldn't bother you.
So go ahead. You
No,
have a thought. I'm sorry.
no, I lost it. Go ahead.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry. Well, one thing that I took away from that, I've been drinking Coca-Cola since I was like 16, 17 years old. It used to be like the thing that gave me the boost that
Yep.
I needed. But while I enjoy still having, I've really cut back. I've cut back to those like 7.5 ounce
Sure.
cans rather than like a 2 liter bottle, which is that's a huge difference, huh?
Just a tad, yes.
Just a tad. So I've come a long way with that. But even if I had like a 20 ounce Coke or whatever, 9 times out of 10, I don't get that high that I used to get.
Yeah.
And when you said, basically I'm paraphrasing, that, it can like, that effect can like wear off. You can get used to it. That's the first thing I thought of. And I think that's why I kind of like need the refresher. And God help us all if the large refresher in the morning doesn't do the trick anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
go ahead.
I can tell you what's going on there. And that is the caffeine now is no longer going to give you a buzz. It's only going to bring you back to your baseline. Does that make sense?
I totally feel that every day. Yep.
Now, when I drink caffeine, I get high. Okay. I mean, I'm very functional. Don't misunderstand me.
No, I got you.
But you know what I mean? I can feel it. I can feel it within 15 minutes. And again, when I'm driving, I try not to have one past 2 o'clock. Even then, because I don't drink it a lot, it stays in me. Obviously I don't process it fast. And so I'm the guy that shouldn't have it after 12 noon, period, no matter what. But in the book, I wrote a book. It's called Release the Coffee Cuffs, Winning the Battle with Caffeine. And there's 14 chapters in the middle of the book. And this isn't a push. This is a social commentary on that thing we just talked about. In every chapter, we talk about the cycle, the rinse and repeat. What happens when you wake up in the morning? You're tired. What do? You have caffeine. Now, the first chapter, which is not part of that, is anecdotal stories. And I originally had it at the end as an entertainment value. What are other people writing about this? And as I went through it and I put it all together, I realized that this was possibly one of the most important chapters in the whole book. Because if you read it, if you actually read that whole chapter, you are going to find yourself in there somewhere. Okay? And about 95 to 98% of those stories, the one common theme is how good they sleep now after they quit. It's across the board. There's only one lady in there that said it really didn't make a difference. Okay, she's obviously not in the norm as far as this group. But I mean, there's guys. There was a guy in there, and he does a YouTube video, and it's 11 minutes long, and it's moving because caffeine almost destroyed his life. He couldn't do anything without having an espresso before he did it. He couldn't go to church. He couldn't have a meeting. He couldn't make a decision. It was destroying his marriage. It was destroying his business. And he quit, and he then shared what happened. And he said, I can't believe how well I sleep. When I wake up in the morning now, naturally, I feel like I have a double or triple espresso. Because
Wow.
your body is built to perform. And one of the things that and I'm going to say this now, and I'll say it at the end of the podcast. How many people actually know what it's like to feel healthy? How many people know what it's like to wake up in the morning and have that natural energy? And it's 85% of them don't, because they're drinking caffeine every day. And I think it's important that people understand that there's side effects from caffeine. All the things we talked about, the high, you get a little bit of a buzz, you might lift weights better. That's all short term. There's no long term. There's no documented health benefits to drinking caffeine. None. I have 300 references in my book. I can't find one. It says you can find studies that are written by companies by guys that are financed by soda companies or coffee companies. Okay. And they generally deal with only really healthy individuals. Okay. So obviously these people are already healthy. Okay. A little caffeine and just not dusting them. But what are we trying to accomplish? And, caffeine in itself is bitter. It's a pesticide. It's a natural pesticide for the coffee plant to keep insects from eating it. And so when they decaffeinate coffee, they take the caffeine and they sell it to all these people to put it in their products. Now, I'm not going to put you on a spot here and ask you the question. I'm going to ask the question and I'll answer right away, okay? Why do you put caffeine into soda? Because people become addicted and they drink more. There is no other reason. I'm not trying to burst anybody's bubble. It just, there's no health reason.
Yeah, you're not bursting my bubble, because I agree. Yeah, I mean, I realize at least some of the things that you're saying. I realize it, but at the end of the day, at least when it comes to Coca-Cola, I just love the taste. It's delicious.
Yeah, right.
So
and there's a little dopamine mixed in there, just so you know, Mark, okay?
Yeah.
Because one of the things I didn't hit when you drink caffeine, actually, when you think about drinking caffeine, you get a dopamine hit. I play a Folgers commercial in the beginning of one of my presentations. Waking up with Folgers in your cup.
Yep.
Mom's making coffee in the kitchen, brings 2 cups back to dad. The 2 little boys are climbing out of bed. They all have a group hug. It just gives you the warm fuzzies. I show that, and everybody in the room that drinks caffeine got a dopamine hit just from watching it. I told this to my daughter. She looked at me. She said, "I didn't have to see it, Dad. You just gave me it." She drinks caffeine. She said, "You don't have to show me. You just talking about it gives you." So dopamine is a big deal because dopamine makes you feel good. Okay, so it's not just cortisol. It's not just adrenaline. It's just not the shutdown of the adenosine receptors. It's also dopamine. Now, what happens when you come down? You want to go back up. And how do you go back up? You got to have a little more caffeine. And so it's that rinse and repeat. I talked about it's in all the chapters. Everything you ever talk about when it comes to caffeine is once you start, and I've been there. I understand completely. Now, when I drink it for 2 days, I don't have any withdrawal. Okay. Because I have not established my system. My system is pretty much flushing it pretty well. I don't know how long it takes. I got a small tangent. We talked about podcasting previously. My daughter and I did a couple podcasts, and we're going to do some more. She had some things happen personally, but what happens is that you never know what's going to happen when you drink caffeine and when you don't drink caffeine. And we talked about this in the podcast. And again, learning curve. We didn't edit it. We put in the part at the end where I had drank some soda and stuff beforehand. Had to go to the bathroom at the end. I said, I got to go potty now. That went into the podcast. Okay, so need to be edited. So it all comes back to the cycle. And what does it do to you? What is it? It does in men. It will raise your blood pressure. It will temporarily increase testosterone production, but long term it will absolutely decrease it because the cortisol and testosterone don't get along. Okay, so as your cortisol goes up, your testosterone goes down. Then You also get something possibly called a cortisol roll. If you drink enough caffeine, even if you're healthy, you can get a roll of fat around your stomach. That's where the cortisol, excess cortisol goes. It also can affect men if you are trying to have a baby with their wife, in that it definitely affects the sperm quality, the motility, the mobility. And it takes two people to have a baby, a man and a woman. Contrary to some beliefs, it does. You need them. And so it's not just the woman, it's the man. Now, in a woman, it affects the blood flow to the uterus. And so her egg may not be quite as fertile or quite as accepting, maybe. I don't know what the technical term is, okay. But I do know that the blood flow goes down. And if I was to give you one thing about women and caffeine, it would be my message to a pregnant woman. And that is this: please don't drink caffeine while you're pregnant. And so I want to be really clear here that caffeine is not the only reason that people have miscarriages and stillbirths, but there are numerous studies that show that it can lead to that. So if one woman stops drinking caffeine while pregnant and has a healthy baby, I might have been the guy. Then I'm a rock star.
Well, you're a rock star either way, and I'm going to use that as a segue because I'm going to come back to this topic to close out. But I do, first of all, I thank you for talking about all that. That's obviously very important. But one thing, you've been an entrepreneur for a long time, so I wanted you to, at least before we run out of time, just to talk a little bit about like maybe some of the things that you've seen change over the years in entrepreneurship and how you've adjusted. Obviously, it's more of a virtual world now than it was, but I would love to hear just your take on that.
The business that I had last year was a coaching business called New Bizpreneur. And I had a great program that addressed and helped new startup business owners. Okay, because and so I would say the first thing for every person that wants to be an entrepreneur, you need to write a fantastic business plan. The business plan template that I gave out was 13 pages long. Now realize this is just with the questions. It's on a Word doc, so you fill it in. It could be anywhere from 30 to 50 pages long when you're done. You know, the executive summary is a page and a half or a page. That tells the person what it is. If you write a good business plan, you discover probably 90% of the things that are going to happen to you. There's 5 or 10% that you can't offset because you don't know they're going to happen. But a good business plan gets you prepared for financing, for staffing, for guidance, for mentors, for all those kind of things. So how it's changed is the brick and mortar versus online. Okay, and that is tremendous. And so here's the irony there is that if you're brick and mortar, you still need to have a substantial online presence, because as you do, I do. When I'm out of town and I want a restaurant, what do? I go online and I look to see what's closest to me. And if they're not on there, guess what? I'm not going there because I don't know they're there. And so it's that aspect is crucial for brick and mortars as well. And there will always be a certain amount of brick and mortars because we like to go out to eat. We like to go somewhere to a hardware store and buy something. You know, I know you can buy some of this on Amazon, but sometimes you want to go and talk to somebody. Okay, let's face it. Human interaction is invaluable. But now you get to the online aspect. And what does a young entrepreneur have to know? Well, you've got to get a great website. You know, and I was blessed with a website from a virtual assistant who created it for me. She did a great job. You need to really pay attention to this. And I would say really be careful of letting other people control your destiny. Because even in an online environment, you still can get caught up in allowing other people to influence you, and they don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. I in this process, I've had two different coaches, and I spent substantial amount of money, and they both failed miserably. And they talked a good talk, but they didn't walk it at all. And so if you're gonna, and coaches are a good thing. If they're good coaches, it's a good thing. If they're not, you're going to waste your money. And the downside of that is you're wasting time, because time is your most valuable resource. Everybody thinks money is. It's not, because you run out of time. I'm 68 years old, and I'm banking on at least 15 good years, because I'm on no meds. I'm natural. I've got a lot of passion about what I do. If you're 30, when I was 28, I did this every day. The first day I worked, first year I owned that first restaurant, I had 5 days off. 3 of those, the mall was closed. The second year, I had 7 days off. So if you're online, you need to really be careful of people that are going to try to take advantage of you. So you want to do background checks. You want to do interviews. And if you're not comfortable after one, do 2. Okay. What's the worst thing that can happen? They tell you they don't want to talk to you twice. Then you probably didn't want to do business with them anyway.
I totally agree with a lot of those points, especially time. People underestimate the value of time. And
Yes.
I know I'm a little bit younger. A few years ago, I hit 40 years old. And even at that point, I was like, okay, I don't have a life that fulfills me. What do I need to do to fix that? Because even at that point, I was feeling it on time. And
Sure.
I also want to note how important it is to work with people. Don't be in too much of a rush. Just because somebody offers you a service that might help you, it doesn't mean it actually will. It took me 5-6 years just to get a sponsor for this show, just to get into a few podcast networks. Like, it took me time, and I was okay just doing the show, learning and getting better at my craft. And yeah, there's some people who put it all together. Maybe they've traveled a different journey than I have, and they put it together and everything works out. But if you're just completely from, literally point A, and if it doesn't feel good in your gut, take your time. It's okay to take your time. Kind of like, and this is another segue for me, kind of like we have with this episode. This has been really amazing. I promised I was going to tie everything back to caffeine, but 2 things that I am going to ask on our way out. First of all, to tell the audience how they can find you, work with you. I know you got a lot of really great things going on, but if you could also take us home and just give us a takeaway for those of us thinking about quitting caffeine, I think that would put a nice bow on this episode.
Sure. Sounds great. I can do this. Okay. The first thing, our website's the best way to get a hold of me, and that would be releasethecoffeecuffs.com, and that's a CUFFS, coffee cuffs. It's a hand takeaway from handcuffs. Our coaching program's on there. Our book is available on there. It's available in paperback and ebook. It'll be on every platform that you have. Okay, I have 6 different publishers. I have around the world. Anybody, I can sell this in places that don't speak English. Okay, and they'll print it, they'll ebook it for me, and the coaching program's on there. There's also some freebies on there to go on, and you can learn a lot there. Okay. And again, the book is, there's not a lot of books about caffeine. There's one that was written about 27 years ago called Caffeine Blues, which is really good. Another one about 15 years ago, The Truth About Caffeine, that was okay. But I think that the $1 trillion a year business kind of influences people to not say negative things about it. And I mean, I'm not all negative about caffeine. In fact, I'm more of a pro knowledge, pro health kind of guy. I want you to understand what it's doing to you, because then you can make an informed decision. So that's how I'll wrap this up. Is right there. How do you want to live your life? Do you want to be healthy? And you can drink caffeine and still be healthy. So don't misunderstand me. Okay. Again, I sometimes speak in generalities and I lose my head and then I have to go back and correct myself. So, but true health, caffeine stops that because it messes with your circadian rhythm, which messes with your sleep. And you don't control that because this is controlled by your body. It's a natural process. And as much as people, and you can try to control, this one guy I was telling you about, he ultimately, how he went to sleep at night is he drank. He would get up in the morning, drink caffeine all day, and then drank at night to go put himself to sleep. It's a vicious cycle. And we all have different stages in this, I would say the best advice I can give you is, if you really question what it does to you, is quit for 7 days. Just do it. Just suck it up. As my wife would say, suck it up, buttercup.
Oh, that's what my wife would say too, verbatim, I might add.
And because what'll happen is you will now, even in 7 days, you still could be in withdrawal. So you might need to go 14 if you really want to know. But you will reach a point where all of a sudden you'll wake up one day and say, wow, I didn't know I could wake up like this. I just didn't know, because I didn't know. It's been so long. And that's where I'll leave you, is that I want people to use their own discretion. I'll use a Brendaism. That's my wife's sayings. And that is, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. However, you can make it thirsty.
Fair enough. Well, Steve Frazier, you gave me, and hopefully the audience, a lot to think about. This was every bit as informative and interesting as I knew it was going to be. I thank you so much for being on Mark My Words today.
You're welcome.
Had a blast.
My pleasure.
You have so much to offer everybody and so much information, and you're really trying to do a good thing for everybody. And I think what you're doing is amazing, which is actually, it speaks to how addictive and awesome caffeine is, because it's almost like it pains me a little bit to say it, but I mean, a lot of what you're saying is very true. And I think the way you're presenting it and the way you're making us think about it is very thought-provoking. So thanks again for being on Mark My Words today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I didn't mention it, but I am your host, Mark Schmidt. So thank you for listening to Mark My Words, and I will see you soon with another episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt, or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.